In quick tip 197, we set up a limited palette of blue and orange. In 198, we showed how we can use those two to interpret a winter scene. In this quick tip, we're going to expand that idea a bit. All right, we're building these three lessons on the idea of blue and orange as a complementary pair of colors. There's something I want to point out to you here that happens with color. Color is not a staid or stable thing. Any color changes, the same color under a different light will become a different color. So colors change. Not only that, but all the colors tend to have the ability to move in the direction of other colors on the color wheel. We call those other colors analogous colors. But we have this wonderful little thing that happens. We can still have a complementary set of colors, but have them expanded just a little bit. Now look, we have blue and orange. If we have exact complements of blue and orange, they're going to create a neutral. They're going to neutralize each other when we mix them together. We have blues, the blue, ultramarine blue, that leans a little bit more towards violet. And then we have phthalo blue that leans just a little bit more towards green. Now we can use both those blues and the orange, same orange as a complement. We can use both those blues and expand the colors that we can come up with. It's a miracle. I'll show you. Now, first of all, I'll tell you that we have such a thing called a split complementary palette, and that simply means that we take one of the complements and we use the colors on either side. But this is just an expanded complementary palette. It doesn't quite split, but it still gives us a real wide range of possibilities. So I have these colors on the palette. Now this is left over from the previous quick tip, 198, and I wanted to leave that because I want to utilize these colors too. But look what happens when we have that ultramarine blue. We have the ultramarine blue and the phthalo blue side by side. Look how they enhance each other. They enhance each other. Phthalo blue makes ultramarine appear to be more purple, and ultramarine makes phthalo appear to be more green, but they're still both blue. And if you saw either one of these isolated, you would simply call it blue. But I'm going to use I'm going to use these two blues now, and we're going to use the same value color line of orange as we used in 197 and 198. Now I'll show you the possibilities. Now I'm not planning to do a demo that is of this scene. I want to show you the colors I find in this scene that I can create here, and then it'll be something that you can play with. It's a really wonderful thing if you allow yourself to play with studies where you are just exploring, not trying to make paintings, but where you're exploring and trying to look for possibilities that you can later apply to your paintings. So let's begin. Now we might say, okay, in that sky color, that feels more phthalo. Well, and it feels what value? So we need to think in terms of color and value. In the previous quick tip, we didn't have to think about color because we only had two. We thought about temperature and value. In this one, now we're going to think of color and value. So we see this sky, and we can say, okay, that would start out being phthalo, but if we hold a brush of phthalo up next to that sky, it feels a little harsh. Even if I make a stroke of phthalo right in here, you see that feels a little harsh for the sky. Well, let's see, can we add some ultramarine to that and sweeten it up? So if we can then pull down into ultramarine, that sky area, or that color for the sky, feels more natural. And it feels even more natural when you don't blend the two together. So if we take a stroke in the same value area, take a stroke of the phthalo and a stroke of the ultramarine, and simply stroke them on, you see how they sort of give each other that vibrancy? by their nature of how they emphasize each other, they give each other that kind of vibrancy that helps us to interpret a vibrant sky. And we can get that same thing, the same kind of vibrancy, no matter where we are in the value scale. So we can go lighter with it in the value scale. We can go lighter, and as we're coming down like this, see there? Go lighter and still have the same vibrancy as we had as we got in that in the darker one. And we can even go we can go darker with it, so it won't matter as long as they are both the same value. We get the same vibrancy. So let's go just a little bit darker, same value area. Pick one. Now remember, not too mixed. That you can mix them, but they're a lot more interesting when you have them have your brush double loaded, where you have a bit of each of the color in the brush, and you simply stroke that on where you see both colors in the brush stroke that you made. Now you can see in whatever value area, I can get that same vibrancy by mixing those two colors together. So that's one miracle of these two colors. So taking any two hues that you have, where each one of them, one leans a little bit more to its neighbor on one side, one leans a little bit more to its neighbor on the other side, and those two hues are going to emphasize each other and create a vibrancy no matter what value, as long as you're in the same value area. So that's one advantage of this. Now another advantage, I'm going to rinse the brush because it's got that it's got the phthalo blue still on it. If we were coming down this scene and interpreting, I look at those hills, I'm seeing in those distant hills it feels more blue-gray, and here it feels more more of a purple. Well, and you see that it's darker than the sky. So we see this area here, that blue-gray, is darker than the sky, and it feels more blue-gray. Well, we don't have to have the phthalo involved in that. We don't want the phthalo involved in that particular one, because then that's going to lean it in a different direction. So we can move in just to the ultramarine blue. Put it right over here. Probably not quite that dark. Let's see. Okay, that's about the same value. And now we'll add into it the orange, just a little bit of the orange, to create a more neutral, because it does feel more neutral. We don't want to overdo that. You see, by adding a little bit of the orange into the ultramarine, now we have that feeling of neutral. Let's see, let's just put that right next there. That's maybe a little bit dark, so I'll put a little bit of light into it, put a little white into it, and see, does that give us? Yes, that pretty much does, doesn't it? It gives us that neutral feeling of the leaning more towards purple, and it's still blue, as we have in this range right back here. All right, now as we're coming down this range where the light's hitting it, you see more green. Well, look at this. When you have the phthalo blue, when you add the phthalo blue to the complementary palette, you add a little bit more yellow to it, because the phthalo does lean towards yellow, just a little bit. The orange already has the yellow in it, so we have the ability between phthalo blue and orange to make a kind of green. Now let's look. I'm going to move over into the lighter version of phthalo blue. Let's put it on the palette right here. Let's move into the lighter version of orange, and it begins to turn green. And there we have that. Now, is that the green we're looking at there? Well, look at that. It's pretty close to the green that we're looking at there. It's a bluer green, but it's nevertheless feeling of green. So you can see how you could use that combination of the green to explore this particular green that we're looking at right here. And and the same thing, as it comes up the value scale, let's put this here, and let's go in the same value range right up here in the phthalo blue, and get enough of the phthalo blue mixed into that orange, and you're going to get just a darker version of that same green. And where do we see that darker version? We might see that darker version of that green right over here. We don't feel it. We don't feel it quite so green because we don't have the other color around it. But you can see that does have that that green, the feeling of green that we can get between those two colors. Now, we can, when we get down into the grass area of a scene like this, we're not going to get that brilliant green from these colors that we're seeing here, but we can still get the feeling of green. So it is possible, if you're in an area like this where you have a green grass, you have the mountains in the distance that are picking up more of the blues and the purples and the bluer sky, it is possible then to do a wonderful harmonized painting just by using this limited palette, and it'll be fun to kind of explore, because let me show you. I'm going to just pick up the dark phthalo blue here. Now I'm going to go into the dark orange, and one of those that is so dark that you can hardly see it. And what we're trying to get is we need to lean more towards phthalo so we can get that feeling of dark green that we see right here. Well, let's see, almost black. Let's move up the value scale a little bit. Let's get a darker version right in here and just pick up more of this right here. And we'll see now. All right, now we can feel it. Now we can feel that green, the feeling of green. There you can see it when I spread it out. That feeling of green in that very dark area we see there. Now, as we're moving closer to the front, if we're doing a study like this, and now I'm just showing you how to get the colors. It's up to you to do the study, but I'm showing you how to think about those colors. As you get closer to the front here, then we're going to have, we got a strong contrast. There's a variation between the dark green and the lighter greens. Our dark greens, we can use this. We're not going to have any problems with the dark greens if we're moving in this frontal area right here. You see how green that is? Nice green, nice dark green. But then when we start to get that lighter, well, let's just go right up in here. Now see, that is about a low light where the light's shining. You see those shadows causing the darker in front. So let's go to about right in here of the phthalo blue, and then let's just put that right here, and then we'll go into that same value area of the orange. Now that's good. Got to keep it towards phthalo blue. There we go. Now that's a middle value, and that begins to feel more like a neutral against that darker green. So this is the kind of interpretation that you're going to get when you use this limited palette. So it's going to have its limits. It's not going to give you that bright yellow green that you'll have in that area, but you are able, let's get that just a little bit bluer here, you are going to be able to get that interpretation. And chances are, there we go, see that gets much bluer when it's in the lighter area, but it feels the feeling of the greener when we're in the darker area. Now let's get just a little bit more of that contrast in here so that you can see the feeling of that darker against the lighter. So just a little bit more of that of the lighter version. One thing that you could do to make it, make the interpretation a little bit more fun, is you could do the double loaded brush thing with the orange, where you get the orange and then you pull the phthalo blue into it, where it's double loaded, meaning that the color is not thoroughly mixed. And then you can begin to give it some strokes where you are actually emphasizing or allowing some of that orange to pop through, and that could give you, it's not the yellow that you see, but that can give you a nice interpretation of light. Let's do that just a little bit more so that you can get a better idea of how that could work like that, just by pushing that orange up into that. So you could see, let's get that a little bit better right there. You can see then how just by using this, what I call the expanded complementary palette, you can have this broad range for interpretation, and you can explore many possibilities and discover things that you didn't know that the set of complementary colors might give you. So if you found this interesting or helpful, and if you have something that you'd like for me to address, drop us a comment right down here and we'll be happy to put it on our schedule. And Don't forget we have our full-length videos at DianneMize.com. 170 of them, exploring all kinds of things regarding the composing of paintings. Color, shapes, any kind of thing dealing with composing, they're there. And also there's an opportunity there to study live with me. And there's your quick tip.